At my best friend's baby shower, my husband said, "We need to leave," and then revealed what no one else knew. The lavender balloons swayed against a perfect blue sky as I walked toward my best friend's baby shower. 20 years of friendship with Hope had taught me her gestures, the slight curve of her lips when she was hiding something, the rehearsed tilt of her head when she wanted attention. But today, something felt different. Wrong. My husband Richard also sensed it, his doctor's eyes tracking movements that others didn't notice. When his hand squeezed mine and he whispered, "We need to leave now," I should have listened. Instead, I ignored him, making excuses as I always did for Hope. It wasn't until we were halfway home that he said the words that would shatter the foundation of my oldest friendship. 3 simple words I refused to believe. What I didn't know then was how deep the deception ran, or what it would cost me to finally see the truth about the person I thought I knew better than anyone. I parked in the circular driveway of Hope's suburban house, gravel crunching under our tires. The house was adorned with soft lavender and cream streamers, with clusters of balloons dancing in the gentle spring breeze. Cars filled both sides of the street, more than I expected for what Hope had described as an intimate celebration. "Looks like half the town came," Richard said beside me, adjusting his collar. He had been unusually quiet during our drive, his hands gripping the steering wheel a little too tightly. "You know Hope," I replied. "She's never done anything halfway." My husband nodded, but something in his expression seemed strange. Richard was usually the social butterfly between us, the one who made friends with strangers in grocery store lines and remembered our neighbors' pets' names. Today, he looked vigilant. "Are you feeling okay?" I asked, placing my hand on his forearm. "Fine," he said, offering a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Just tired from the double shift." I let it go. Richard's work at the hospital often left him exhausted, and I didn't want to start Hope's baby shower with an argument. We walked down the manicured path toward the front door, my arms loaded with a gift basket filled with organic cotton onesies, children's books, and a handmade blanket I had worked on for the past 3 months. The door opened before we could knock. "Sophia!" Hope cried out, arms extended. My best friend stood before me, radiant in a pale pink floor-length dress that flowed around her body. Her blonde hair was styled in loose waves, a flower crown atop her head. Her makeup was flawless, highlighting her bright blue eyes and rosy cheeks. She looked like something out of a glossy pregnancy magazine, the type where models with fake bellies sell the dream of maternal happiness. "You look incredible," I said, handing Richard the gift basket so I could hug her. Hope held me at arm's length, her body slightly pulled away from mine. "Don't crush the—" She laughed, patting her stomach. I noticed she carried her belly with pride, but something about how she touched it seemed rehearsed, almost theatrical. "We wouldn't want that," I smiled, trying to catch Richard's eye. But he was scanning the room behind Hope, his gaze methodical. The entryway opened to a transformed living space. Lavender floral arrangements adorned every surface. A professional photographer circulated among the crowd, capturing spontaneous moments. In the corner, a bartender mixed mocktails and mimosas at a marble-topped bar. A neon sign glowed on the back wall. "It's a girl," in pink cursive letters. "This is— wow," I breathed, taking it all in. "Hope, this must have cost—" "Don't worry about that," she interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "Most of it was donated. People have been very generous." Richard's eyebrows raised slightly, but he remained silent. Miguel, Hope's husband of 3 years, approached with 2 champagne flutes. Tall and angular with dark hair that was starting to recede at the temples, he handed one to Richard. "For the non-pregnant among us," he joked, his clear accent cutting through the words. "Congratulations," Richard said, clinking glasses. "First-time fatherhood, a big change coming." "The biggest," Miguel agreed, though his eyes briefly darted to Hope. Something passed between them, a look I couldn't decipher. "Sophia!" A familiar voice called from across the room. Carmen pushed through the crowd, her curly hair bouncing with each step. Behind her came Paloma and Diego, my old high school circle, complete once again. "It's been forever," Paloma exclaimed, pulling me into a hug. Her slender figure was wrapped in a bohemian dress, paint stains visible under her nails despite her obvious attempt to scrub them clean. 6 months is hardly forever," I laughed. "In artist time, it's forever," she countered. Carmen stayed back, watching us with the analytical gaze she had developed since becoming a therapist. "How is the counseling center treating you, Sophia?" "Busy as always," I replied. "You know how it is. Everyone needs someone to talk to." Diego remained at the edge of our circle, hands in his pockets. Hope's younger brother had grown into his features since high school, No longer the gangly kid who slipped notes into my locker when he thought no one was watching. "Good to see you," he said, his eyes lingering on mine a bit longer than necessary. "You too," I replied, suddenly aware of Richard observing our interaction. Hope clapped her hands. "Now that Sophia is here, I can show everyone the nursery mock-up. The designer finished the renderings yesterday." She led us upstairs, chattering about organic paint and sustainably harvested wood. Richard walked beside me, his fingers brushing mine. "Did you notice anything?" he whispered. "Like what?" I asked, keeping my voice low. Richard hesitated for a second, his eyes still scanning the upstairs as if he were silently collecting data. Then he just shook his head, squeezed my fingers, and responded. "I'll explain later. Just keep paying attention." That phrase stuck in my mind like a warning. One of those things you only understand the weight of after everything has already collapsed. We followed Hope, who proudly opened the door to what would be the baby's room. The walls were decorated in pastel tones. The furniture looked freshly assembled, and a framed screen on the wall displayed the digital rendering of the final project. "The crib comes from Scotland," she said, smiling. "Reforestation wood, all certified. And the armoire is vintage French. I restored it with my own hands. Well, with help from a carpenter. All this is a lot," I murmured. "I know," Hope laughed as if she had won an Oscar. "But when it's for a little princess, we make everything worthwhile." While the other guests gushed over the details and asked questions about wallpaper and baby names, I felt Richard's eyes stopping at every detail, until he stood motionless for a second, staring fixedly at a small picture frame on top of the dresser. "An ultrasound." "Hope?" he said, voice calm. "How many weeks along are you exactly?" She blinked. She seemed not to have understood the question. "Huh? Oh, I'm 30 weeks along. Why?" He made, as if he were just curious, but I knew that sound. It was the voice he used with patience when he knew something didn't add up. "Any problem?" I asked, now really unsettled. Richard smiled and responded with a, "Of course not." But the squeeze on my hand intensified. I barely enjoyed the rest of the event. Between the souvenir demonstration, group photos, and toasts, my stomach churned without me knowing exactly why. It was only on the way home, with the windows closed and the road stretching ahead of us, that he said it. "Sophia, Hope's pregnancy is fake." I almost laughed, almost. But the way he said it, calm, without irony, like someone delivering a terminal diagnosis, paralyzed me. "What?" I saw the ultrasound. It wasn't hers. It was from an exam done months ago, used for demonstration in clinics. And the shape of the belly. It's a fake belt. I saw the coupling at the bottom when she turned around. She's using padding. "That doesn't make the slightest sense," I replied. "She's organizing a whole baby shower. Why would someone fake a pregnancy?" Richard didn't respond immediately. He looked at me as if he expected me to reach the conclusion. "Because it's not just a party, Sophia. There's something behind it. Money? A scam? And look, you can hate me for saying this, but Miguel doesn't seem happy, and he barely touched her the whole time." I swallowed hard. "This is crazy." "No," he responded. "Crazy is that you ignored everything for this friendship you idealized. Sophia, Hope is lying, and she's lying to a lot of people. The question is why?" I couldn't sleep that night. Or the following ones. I relived every conversation I had with Hope over the past few months. The stories that didn't make sense, the disappearances, the ignored messages, the way she never let anyone really touch her. And something in me, something deep down, began to recognize the truth that my mind was still struggling to accept. On the 5th day after the baby shower, the answer fell in my lap, or rather, in my inbox. An email. Subject, urgent, you need to know this. From anonymous@protonmail.com. Attachment, photos. Zip. My hands trembled as I clicked. The photos opened slowly. First, an image of Hope at an aesthetic clinic. Then, a sequence showing her buying a fake belly. Different models with removable padding. In one of the photos, she appears with a store employee helping her adjust the elastic belt. The last image was the cruelest. She was in a cafe, smiling. In front of her, a woman was crying. The security camera caption marked the date, 2 months before the baby shower. The woman was holding what appeared to be an ultrasound exam in her hands. The caption sent along with the photos said, "She stole this woman's baby. Ask Miguel." My blood froze. At that moment, I called Richard. He was on duty and could only say, "Wait for me. Don't do anything yet. We're going to do this the right way." But I didn't wait. I went to Hope's house. I rang the doorbell once, twice, 3 times. When she opened the door, The automatic smile dissolved in the same instant. Sophia? What a surprise. It's no surprise, Hope. Just answer me. Whose baby is it? Her face went livid. She tried to laugh, tried to deny, tried to dissemble. But I had the photos. And at that moment, I was no longer the understanding best friend. I was the woman who finally saw who Hope really was. And she, well, was going to pay for every second she made me doubt myself. She stood there at the doorway, as if the world had frozen for a few seconds. The Hope I knew, or thought I knew, was unraveling in front of me, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Sophia, what are you talking about? I crossed my arms, containing the rage that threatened to spill out like lava through every pore. Don't pretend, Hope. Not today. Not after everything. I saw the photos. I saw you in that store. And I saw that woman. You stole her story. Her belly. Her child. Her face contorted. For an instant, I thought she was going to collapse. But no. Hope was colder than I thought. She took a deep breath, composed herself, and forced a smile. You're distorting things. I can explain. Explain. Now. She opened the door wider, signaling for me to come in. The interior of the house still smelled of artificial flowers and expensive candles. The baby shower ribbons were still hanging. Everything seemed as fake as her smile. That woman, she began, pouring herself a glass of water, but not offering me any. She couldn't keep the baby. She begged me to help her. I just was a bridge. And what's her name? Hope froze for a second. Her name? That. Because if you're saying you helped, then you should at least remember the name of the mother of the child you claim to be expecting, right? She hesitated. It was a closed process. Anonymous. For the woman's rights? Stop, I interrupted. You can't even lie well. I put my phone on the table. The screen already showed the photos, the fake belly, the generic ultrasound, and the most painful image, her smiling while that woman cried, holding the exam that clearly no longer belonged to her. She paled again. This time, she didn't try to deny. Why, Hope? My voice came out low but full of venom. Why lie to everyone? Why put on a whole show? Why involve me in this? She lowered her head. Because I was losing everything. How so? She pulled out the chair and sat down, as if she were about to confess a crime. Miguel was going to leave me. He had already said he didn't see any more future. And, she hesitated, I knew he wanted children, that he always wanted them. And I can't. I never could. He still doesn't know that. I found out around the time of the wedding and never told him. I sat down too. As angry as I was, I needed to understand how far she had gone. So you thought faking a pregnancy would be a solution? It wasn't just for him, she retorted. It was for everything. My parents, my in-laws, our friends, you. All of you expected something from me. The image of the perfect woman. Married, elegant, pregnant. The truth was dirty. Sad. This was prettier. And the woman from the cafe? That woman was suffering. She looked destroyed. Did you buy that ultrasound from her? Hope didn't respond. She just stayed there, looking at her own reflection in the window glass. I made a deal, she finally said. She was homeless, without health insurance, the boyfriend had disappeared. She didn't want the baby. At least that's what she said at the time. She offered me everything. The exam, the story, whatever I wanted, and in exchange, I paid $6,000. My stomach churned. That's human trafficking. Hope. It wasn't supposed to be like that, she whispered. I just wanted something pretty to show. A chance not to be the empty woman I felt I was. I wanted to scream, break everything, but I didn't. Instead, I breathed deeply and got up. You lied to everyone, to your parents, to Miguel, to your friends. To me. You used real suffering to stage a motherhood that never existed. And you know what the worst part is? She didn't respond. You're not sorry. You're afraid of getting caught. Finally, she looked at me, and for the first time, there was no theater, no character, just the real woman, stripped of the pose. And what are you going to do now? I smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. You're going to find out. And when you find out, you're going to remember that all this started because you couldn't admit that you're human like the rest of us. I left there trembling, but without hesitation. In the weeks that followed, I began my plan. First, I gathered all the evidence, the photos, the dates, the store records, the anonymous email. Then I hired a lawyer, someone experienced in fraud and moral damages cases. I sent a file to the hospital where she worked as public relations. then to the circle of friends, including Paloma, Carmen, and even Diego. Each one received a copy with the title, "Do You Know the Real Hope?" But the final blow would be at Miguel's birthday dinner. I self-invited, with help from a mutual friend, and arrived punctually. Hope saw me entering and paled again. Her expression said it all. She knew that was where everything would crumble. I waited for the moment when she made a toast, raising her glass to her husband, talking about the joy of building a family together. Then I stood up. "Miguel, can I talk to you for a moment?" Just the two of us. He followed me to the garden. My heart was beating hard, but my voice came out firm. She's not pregnant. The belly is fake. The exams bought. The woman who should be the baby's mother is in a shelter now. And all this was a farce. I handed him a folder. Miguel opened it, read. He said nothing. He simply went back inside. And while I watched from afar, I saw everything happen. The confrontation, the silence, the glass falling to the floor, the look of horror in her parents' eyes, the guests leaving, one by one, as if they were leaving the funeral of a lie. That night, Hope lost everything, and me, I slept like never before. It was curious to think about that. How after weeks ruminating over every detail, every doubt, every pain, I finally put my head on the pillow and simply disconnected, without waking up in the middle of the night in panic, without staring at the ceiling waiting for some magical answer. That night, I slept the sleep of someone who knew that, for the first time in a long time, she had done the right thing. The next morning, I woke up with my phone vibrating frantically. More than 50 notifications, missed calls from known and unknown numbers, messages from friends, work colleagues, even from people from school I barely spoke to in years, all starting with some derivative of, "My God, Sophia, is it true?" Or, "Did you see what happened with Hope?" I opened Instagram, and there it was. Hope's profile, which had always been meticulously curated, was now a war zone. Comments disabled on all photos. The last image, a mirror selfie with the caption, "Counting the days to meet my little princess," now seemed like an empty scream. A pathetic performance of a lie that had crumbled in public square. But what really surprised me was the video, recorded by a guest at Miguel's birthday, showing exactly the moment when he, with a trembling voice, confronted Hope in front of everyone. "Do you have something to tell me? Or should I start reading this out loud?" The video didn't capture everything, but it captured enough. Her reaction, the silence of the room, the moment she ran upstairs, stumbling over her own feet while the guests looked at each other, shocked. A whisper was repeated by several. She lied about the pregnancy. At that moment, the Hope everyone knew ceased to exist. And that's when the chaos began. The first to distance themselves were the closest friends. Paloma sent me a long message, saying she felt betrayed, ashamed for having helped plan the baby shower. Carmen, with her always calm posture, called me saying she had requested distance from Hope in the psychological support group they led together. "I can't share a space of trust with someone who builds lies of that size," she said. But what really impacted me was what Miguel did afterwards. He filed a lawsuit. Yes, a lawsuit. For emotional fraud and moral damages. According to his lawyer, Hope had used the couple's resources to finance a project involving prolonged and premeditated staging, which directly affected his reputation, emotional stability, and even his career. The news came out in local newspapers, and not just in the small ones. Gossip sites took the story as if it were a movie script. Suburban influencer forges pregnancy to save marriage and loses everything in public scandal. Baby shower from hell, pregnancy farce becomes police case, fake pregnant, the woman who deceived her own husband and the entire city. And in all the comments, people mentioned my name. That's when the narrative changed. What was supposed to be just a personal confrontation became a collective novel. I became the betrayed best friend, the woman who had the courage to expose the truth, the righteous one in the midst of madness. Of course, there were those who said I exaggerated, that exposing Hope that way was cruel, that I could have solved everything privately. But you know what those people didn't know? That behind the theater, Hope used me, manipulated me, that I was the first to buy little clothes with her, to help set up the baby's room, to spend nights knitting a blanket for a baby that never existed, that I was the one who defended her from gossip, who believed in her even when Richard alerted me. I was her shield, and she used me as a showcase. So no, I didn't regret anything. But justice has a price. And I was about to discover that exposing a lie doesn't always protect you from the consequences. 2 weeks later, I received a court summons. Hope was suing me for defamation and improper exposure of image. I laughed when I read it. A dry, ironic laugh, almost without sound. She was really trying to reverse the situation. After lying about everything, now she said she was a victim of my public destruction campaign. I sat on the sofa, the document in my hands, and thought for a few minutes. The blood was still boiling. The rage was still there. But more than that, there was now something different. Certainty. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. "Let's go up," I said. "I didn't start this war. But since she wants to fight, she's going to find out what it means to really lose." And that same day, I began to mount my counterattack. But that was just the beginning. The defamation case that Hope opened against me was the spark that was missing to transform a scandal into open war. She really believed she could reverse the game, play the victim, and paint me as a vengeful, uncontrolled woman who destroyed her life out of jealousy or envy. And the worst part, some people began to fall for that narrative. Soon, Facebook posts appeared with captions like, "There are always two sides to the story," and "Women need to support other women, not destroy each other." I saw people commenting that I might be exaggerating, that maybe the pregnancy was real and the loss too traumatic for her to admit, that I was nothing more than a bitter ex-friend, wanting attention. But I had something she didn't have, the truth. And more importantly, I had Richard, a rational, centered man who knew people within the medical and legal area. He helped me gather a true arsenal of evidence. The images, the videos, the bank records of the fake belly purchase. We even got the contact of the woman from the cafe who, after much hesitation, agreed to give formal testimony about what happened, how she sold the exams, how she was coerced into silence, and how Hope promised her continued financial help, but never delivered. Our defense wouldn't just be solid, it would be crushing. Meanwhile, on her side, Hope was slipping more and more. Miguel disappeared from social media and, according to mutual friends, moved out of the house where they lived. The joint account was closed. The in-laws, who once praised every step she took, published a discreet note saying they had no more comments to make about the matter and asked for respect for the family's privacy. And still, she insisted. The posts returned. Instagram videos with sad background music, smeared makeup, captions like, "I've already lost everything, but I'm still being attacked." It was disgusting to see how she tried to manipulate the public. "She's betting that victimhood will work," said my lawyer Paula, while we reviewed the case pieces. "People like that always try to transform shame into pity. But this theater will fall apart in court." And the court arrived. 2 months after the summons, we found ourselves face to face in a cold room with 2 white light and uncomfortable chairs. It was the first time I saw Hope since Miguel's birthday. She looked different, thinner, dejected, but still vain. She wore a light blazer, light makeup, and a trained expression. The actress ready for her most important performance. She didn't look at me once. The judge entered. The process began, and in the days that followed, every lie of hers was dissected in public. The images projected. The records exhibited. The testimony of the woman from the cafe was the final blow. Recorded on video with real tears, no script, no embellishment. Just the raw pain of someone who was deceived and discarded as an extra in a false story. Hope shrank in her chair. But I didn't feel victorious at that moment. I felt disgusted. Was this what remained of a 20-year friendship? A scenario of lies and manipulation where I was just another disposable piece? On the last day of the trial, the judge read his sentence. The defamation action was dismissed. Hope was sentenced to pay the court costs, in addition to a fine for bad faith litigation. The judge even mentioned that her conduct flirted with the criminal, and that the case would be referred for investigation for possible fraud and improper appropriation of medical identity. She didn't cry. She didn't protest. She just lowered her head. And there, in front of everyone, I saw that nothing remained of the woman I once called soul sister. I left the room with my head held high. But I confess, victory had a bittersweet taste, because deep down, a part of me still wanted to understand. Why would someone who knew me so well, who saw me at my worst days, who knew my secrets and fears, why would someone like that choose to stab me in the back? Richard squeezed my hand in the hallway. "Don't try to understand. Sometimes we need to accept that not every bond is worth rescuing." And he was right. In the days that followed, my life returned to a strange kind of normalcy. The media moved on. People stopped commenting. Hope disappeared from the networks, changed her number, erased the false shine she had so cultivated. Some said she was living with a distant aunt, others that she was voluntarily committed for psychological treatment. But I didn't seek to know. because her story, for me, had ended there. Except fate still had plans. One day, 2 months after the trial, while walking with Richard through a fair in the city center, I saw a figure sitting on the ground, leaning against a wall, hidden under a hood. Thin, dirty, with sunken eyes and deep dark circles. It was her, Hope. She had a cardboard sign on her lap with the words, "Help with food, God bless." I froze. She looked up. She saw me, and said nothing. Neither did I. I just grabbed Richard's hand, turned my face, and kept walking. Because there, on that cold sidewalk, she was finally feeling what she had spent her life avoiding: consequences. And that was the most perfect revenge of all. But however sweet it was to see the collapse of the woman who deceived me, the truth is that the taste of revenge doesn't last as long as one imagines. It comes strong, explosive, almost euphoric. But then a strange silence settles in, a moral hangover. And that's when I began to think, what now? I went back to living the routine. I woke up early, attended to my patients at the counseling center, had lunch with Richard whenever our schedules coincided. And at night we watched series with our feet intertwined on the sofa. But even with everything at peace, sometimes I still found myself staring at nothing, wondering silently, how did everything get to that point? What surprised me was the reaction of some people, those who weren't so close but who heard about the story and came looking for me afterwards. Women who were also manipulated by friends, betrayed by those they trusted, used as shields or ladders for others' ambitions. Each story I heard was a parallel version of mine, as if there existed a silent cycle of invisible destructions happening all the time between people who call themselves best friends. It was during that time that I was invited to give a lecture at an event about toxic bonds and emotional manipulation between women. I refused at first. I didn't feel ready, nor worthy of being on a stage as an example of overcoming. But after much insistence and hearing Richard remind me how much I could help other people with my experience, I accepted. And there, in that packed auditorium with more than 300 women looking at me, I understood the real dimension of what had happened. It wasn't just about Hope. It was about me. About how much I had stopped seeing myself in recent years, trying to be the perfect friend, the understanding one, the reliable one. About how I diminished myself to fit into the mold of someone who lived erasing herself in silence. Sometimes, I said into the microphone with a broken voice, we only discover who we really are when someone tries to destroy us. Because it's not the fall that defines us. It's what we do after it. I was given a standing ovation. It was a moment I never expected to live. And ironically, it was thanks to Hope. After that, I received more invitations. I began writing texts, giving interviews. It wasn't fame, not like she sought. It was something more subtle. Respect, voice, space. I, who had always been her shadow, now walked with my own light. But then, like every story that seems to close in peace, something unexpected happened. One day, I was leaving the counseling center when I found a letter under my car's windshield wiper. A manila envelope, no return address. Inside, just 2 handwritten pages. The handwriting was familiar, painfully familiar. It was from Hope. The first sentence already took my breath away. If you're reading this, it's because I finally accepted that I lost. I closed the car door, turned on the air conditioning, and began reading, not knowing what to expect. I don't know if you'll believe any word of mine. I don't expect forgiveness, nor compassion, but after so much silence, I thought it was fair that you knew what led me to all that. You deserve at least that. I grew up believing I needed to be perfect to be loved, that one mistake was enough and everything would crumble. It was like that with my parents. It was like that in relationships. So, when I realized Miguel was leaving me, that my career was hanging by a thread, that everyone around me seemed to be moving forward while I was sinking, I panicked. I never planned to hurt you. But I realized too late that using you as a shield was the biggest of all mistakes. Because of all the people I could have betrayed, you were the last, the only one who truly loved me without charge, without mirror. And I destroyed that, out of fear. Today, looking at my life, I understand that I didn't lose everything because of the scandal. I lost everything the day I started pretending to be someone I never was. You just removed the mask. And however much I hated you for that, today, I'm grateful. I'm leaving. Far away. I need to start over. If I'm lucky, maybe I'll manage to be someone better one day. And if that day comes, I hope to find you. Not to ask for apologies, but to say that I learned. With affection. Yes, it still exists. Hope. I sat there, with the letter on my lap and teary eyes. Part of me wanted to tear it up. Another part wanted to scream, call her, ask where she was, what she had done with the woman I knew. But most of me just accepted. She was finally honest. Late? Yes, but honest. And I, who no longer needed her to validate me, could finally breathe in peace. Revenge had been done. Justice achieved. But what healed me most was realizing that I survived, whole, and that never again, ever, would I let someone erase me. But, however much I had said that with conviction, the universe seems to have a special talent for testing our certainties. A few days after reading Hope's letter, I was surprised by an unusual visit at the office. It was a common morning, with a full schedule, patients waiting, and my head already occupied with 1,000 things. Until the receptionist called me discreetly. Sophia, there's a girl out there. She doesn't have a scheduled appointment, but she insists she needs to talk to you. She says it's urgent, but kind of personal. I frowned. Who is she? She says her name is Isabella, and that it has to do with Hope. I felt my stomach churn. I got up immediately and went to the reception, and there she was, a thin young woman, maybe 19 or 20 years old, wearing simple clothes and holding a blue folder against her chest. She had red eyes as if she had been crying. Are you Sophia? She asked in a low voice. I am. What happened? She hesitated, looking around, uncomfortable with the professional environment. I signaled for her to follow me to a private room we use for emergency care. Sit down, I said, trying to stay calm. She sat but kept the folder in her arms, as if it were a life jacket. Sorry for coming like this. I didn't know where else to go. Hope talked about you. When? 3 days ago. She found me at a bus station, said I looked like someone she knew, started talking, and ended up offering me food, a place to spend the night. But I escaped the next day. You escaped? Because she said she wanted to help me, and that maybe I could return the favor. That I just had to say I was the biological mother of her baby. That it was just rehearsing a story, memorizing some names. She said everything would be fine. That it was just theater to clean up her image, that no one would be harmed. I felt rage rising up my spine. Is she still trying to sustain that farce? Isabella nodded. I recorded the conversation, and I brought the audios. She opened the folder. There was a portable recorder, some handwritten notes, and even a receipt from a bus ticket she never used. She pressed the button, and there it was. Hope's voice, sweet as poison, articulating plans, promises, well-rehearsed lies. You could even hear Isabella's laughter in the background, nervous, clearly uncomfortable. She's trying to manipulate another vulnerable girl, I whispered, feeling a painful déjà vu. I thought she wanted to adopt me, Isabella said, tears returning to her eyes. But then I saw she just wanted to use me as an extra, just like she did with that woman from the cafe. I saw everything. I investigated. I saw the videos. I saw your lecture. That's why I came here. You're the only person she fears. I wanted to cry. From rage, from exhaustion, but I breathed deeply. Thank you for coming to me. You were brave. Very brave. She looked at me with surprise, as if no one had ever told her that. And at that moment, I made a decision. Isabella, do you have somewhere to stay? She shook her head, shyly. I picked up the phone, called a friend who worked at an NGO for youth sheltering at risk. I explained the situation. In less than 20 minutes, Isabella had a reserved room, with guaranteed psychological support and legal help on the way. But I had another mission, and this time I wasn't going to wait for someone else to solve it. With the audios in hand, I contacted the prosecutor's office. I sent the material, the reports, and made a formal request to reopen the case against Hope. I explained everything, including the risks to other young women, the ongoing manipulation attempts, and the recurrence of fraudulent behavior. 2 weeks later, I received the news. Arrest warrant issued. Hope was detained trying to board an interstate bus with false identification. The arrest was discreet, but no less symbolic. This time, there was no audience, no party, no light pink dress, just handcuffs, and the end of the disguise. When I received the confirmation, I was alone at home. I sat on the sofa, looked at nothing, and felt neither joy. I felt relief, a silence so dense and profound that it seemed to weigh on my shoulders, and at the same time, free me. It's over. This time, for real. In the months that followed, life continued. Isabella continued with her rehabilitation. She started studying, got a simple job at a cafe near the center. From time to time, she sent me messages telling about her achievements. I became a kind of informal godmother, and silently, I knew I was rescuing a bit of what Hope tried to destroy in me. Hope? She was sentenced to 3 years in prison without the right to an open regime in the first year. Fraud, ideological falsehood, attempted scam. Her name became a sad reference. A woman who had everything in her hands but chose to build castles on quicksand. And me? I moved on. Stronger, firmer, more aware of who I was. But most importantly of all, free. I didn't know exactly what to do with that freedom at first. It was like leaving a dark room after years with your eyes closed. The light hurts. Peace is strange, silence, uncomfortable. You spend so much time living in a state of alert, waiting for the next betrayal, the next attack, the next theater, that when the stage finally dismantles, you wonder what's left of you besides the audience. And what was left of me was a woman stronger than she ever imagined being. Over time, Hope's story became just one more among so many other silent tragedies that people comment on in passing, at the supermarket, or at dinners with friends, but without the same indignation. Social media moved on, people found new controversies, and her name disappeared from the headlines. But not from my heart, and not from my memory. From time to time, I still hear someone comment cautiously, "You knew her, didn't you?" And I just smile politely and say, lightly, I knew her. Once. Because that's what she became. Once. A chapter that existed, that marked, that changed everything, but that passed. While she paid her debt to justice, and I hope to her own conscience, I rebuilt my life with the honesty she never managed to sustain. I continued with the counseling center. I expanded services, opened new partnerships, trained young therapists. My name became associated with overcoming, integrity, and no longer with anyone's shadow. And with Richard, well, we grew. In pain, in complicity, in patience. Because it wasn't easy for him to see all that happen to the one he loved. He stayed with me at every step, not as a savior, but as a foundation. And I never doubted us again after that. 2 years passed since the day Hope was arrested. On a calm spring morning, I received a letter in a stamped envelope. Sender, State Penitentiary System. I took a while to have the courage to open it, but I opened it, and I read. It was a form, request for authorization for detainee Hope, about to be released for good behavior, to maintain formal contact with people from her old personal circle. She had listed only one name, mine. There was no attached letter, no emotional justification, no apology, just the dry, bureaucratic, objective request. I closed the envelope, breathed deeply, and threw it in the trash. That night I wrote a letter, not to her, but to myself, a farewell letter. You will no longer carry my hours. You will no longer live in my silence. I don't hate you, nor do I excuse you. I simply no longer carry you with me. Sophia. I kept that letter on the last page of my diary, the one I started months before everything exploded, the day I suspected the first lie. The following week, I took Isabella to dinner. She had been promoted at the cafe and was about to start a technical course in nutrition. She laughed nervously, talked nonstop, and called me Aunt Sophia to provoke. It was good. It was light. It was new. After dinner, we walked through the city. She told me she dreamed of opening a simple bistro with natural foods and fair prices. She said she wanted to work with women like her, young women who came from nothing and just needed someone to believe in them. Do you know why, Aunt Sophia? She asked, with shining eyes. Why? Because you believed in me, and you changed my story. Now it's my turn. I smiled. There, under the city lights, I understood everything. The revenge I so desired, that burned inside me for months, no longer had space in me, because what remained was greater, more lasting. I no longer needed the world to hate Hope. I just needed to love myself enough not to allow someone like her to have more power over my life. At the end of the day, it wasn't about her fall. It was about my rise. The following week, I published an article that went viral. The friend who destroyed me and gave me back my life. Without names, without exposure. Just truths. And in that text, I closed like this. If you were ever betrayed by someone who claimed to love you, no, you are not alone. And no matter how much they try to silence you, erase you, or use you, you can still start over. Freedom begins the day you stop asking permission to exist. Today, I look back with compassion. For me. For the woman who endured more than she should have. For the woman who thought she needed to be nice to be loved. For the woman who finally learned to be firm without being cruel. Hope? She exists somewhere with her own ghosts, but I no longer walk with her. The stage is mine now. and there's no more room for liars in the audience.